In this lesson, we're going to do the windows, and I'm just going to do one of them, and then that window that we create will be copied around along the entire facade. Now, we only really have two window types. We have the typical window, and then we have the one on the ground floor. So I'm going to work on the typical one, and then the one for the ground floor will just be slightly edited, but in effect, it's the same thing. So I'm not going to be showing the same procedures twice. So to get that window done, I'm just going to isolate that CAD geometry for the window, and then just looking at it in front view, I'm also going to change my layer so that we have a new layer called O3, and I'm going to call this one frames. And at the same time, I'm going to create another layer called O3 glass, since our window frame will comprise of those two. So starting out with the frames, I'm going to create, you can either start with rectangles and then use sweep, or you can start with a solid plane and then segment out where you have the frames going across. So I'm going to do a combination of both just to show you the different techniques. So I'm going to start off with the rectangle, and then over that rectangle I'm going to do a sweep, just in the way that we did the moldings earlier on. For the sizing, you will have to measure what the size is, or at least have a look visually and just see until it kind of snaps into the place. So in this case, it's 5 centimeters, and I would like the length to be about 0.3 deep so that we have a nice deep window frame. Now also I want to undo the smoothing since it is quite a rigid object. There aren't any curves, so we don't need the smoothing. And then for the internal windows, I'm just going to isolate that again. And for this one, we're going to be using a plane. So again, with your snap tool on, plane selected, you can just go and create a plane. Now, you can go and adjust the length segments. So you have 2 and 2. And the next part is to go and convert to editable poly, or you can add the editable poly as a modifier in your stack. So either or will work just fine. So the first thing, I want to select all of it. By hitting F2 again, we can go and see through our object. And we can go and insert that just to get this window edge, the main one on the outside. So I'm going to insert, and then just move it in slightly. Now what I want to do is, actually this is going to be 0.25, because the second layer will actually go and insert all of this on the inside. So I still need to make a slight adjustment here by moving this segment down slightly to make sure that this is in the middle. And you'll see why just now. Next thing you want to do is you want to go and take these polys here in the middle, the ones that are in red, and we want to make them slightly deeper. So what needs to happen here is that we extrude, right click and just extrude on that, and then just sink them in ever so slightly. Sink them in by, let's say, 0.05, so 5 centimeters, about 2 inches. And the next thing you can do with those internal poly selected is just go and insert. But this time, instead of inserting by group as we did for the outside, we do by polygon, and it's going to be I think it's 0.125. I hope that is correct. Let's just have a look in the front view. So 0.125, around about there. So that will then give me the other subdivision for my internal frames. That's a third layer of frames. And we still have these 9 polys selected, which we can now go and detach to create our glass. Now, what I like to do for the glass is, first of all, I like to tessellate it so I can see it in my viewport. So TES, enter. Let's just go to square and then right click on the tension. I'm going to just cut this tessellate and then put it onto the actual window frames. So that's, instead of the window frame, sorry, the glass, pardon me. And so what you see now is that the glass has been tessellated. We can clearly see it because it has the nice square. And then we have this frame, which is this object here. So let's just exit out of our isolation. Let's have a look at what we've just created. So we have this object. Now the other thing I need to do is I still need to go and copy this down. So just using the snap tool being on, hitting spacebar to lock that. Let's go and copy that object down and create an instance. And that can now get shifted into the window just to give it some more depth. Now you can have a look, if you do have plans for how the window is made or a section cutting through, you can see exactly how these depths are, but I'm just showing you the general creation method so that you can see that there are many different styles of insertion as well as sweeping to just create frames in a different way. Now the other thing we want to do is we want to create some more depth to this since we want the glass to be more three-dimensional. So I'm going to first of all push it in slightly more, and I'm going to shell it just to give it some depth. You could shell it by a literal amount of about 6 to 8 millimeters, but I just use 1 centimeter as it is just easier to type in. And then the other thing you want to do is you want to give your actual window frame some depth. So you could go and select all of the openings. Let's just select that in one go like this, and let's give it some depth. And if you really want to, you can go ahead and join or at least bridge all of these back segments, or you can even go and shell the frame itself. So there's different ways of doing it. It depends whether you need any internal shots. Very often I just leave it empty like this if we only do external facades. So that's what I'm going to do in our case. But since we're discussing it, let's just have a look at the other way of doing it. So I'm going to just undo that action so we can see possibly the better method for doing this is you can go and select this frame by just neatly selecting all of the polys and then detaching it and shelling that individually. So if you, let's say, shell that by 3 centimeters, that'll give you a nice solid window frame. And you'll see as well, because we shelled it and because we detached it, we're now missing the one at the top. So we can go ahead and delete that entire one. And then for this part here, you can either do the same thing or you can just leave it as is. If you would like to be diligent about it, let's go to the top view and then let's just do this properly. So we can select that front face and we can go Control-I, delete the rest. And with that selected, we can go and shell that. So there are so many different ways of doing this that there really is no incorrect way. So it is really up to your working style, what you feel more comfortable in. And you'll see there, I'm just going to reselect that and then recopy it upwards, same way that we did it before. So there you have it. That's one of the windows. Last thing that we want to do is we want to just change the layer of the glass. So we want to put that onto the glass layer, perhaps change the color to light blue or something that speaks to you so that you can see it before you texture it. And then what we can do at this point now is we can go and group this and then call it window. This could actually be quite a good time to go and texture it before you go and group it, just so that you don't have to ungroup it. But I'd like to leave the texturing till much later in the video. I'm not that concerned with the texturing since I believe that by your stage where you're at right now, you're quite comfortable texturing. And in reality, if you just make everything white and glass, it actually looks pretty good as an architectural render. So I'm not going to focus too much on getting the reflective glossiness perfect for the paint style that we're going to use for the window. So no real issues there. So if I exit the isolation, you'll see that we now have one of our windows. All that's left to do is to go and copy it across. And then to do that, you just select that group and then hit your spacebar. And then you can just use common points holding down Shift, and you can just instance that across. So let's say that instance twice, you can select that and redo it upwards. So what I'm going to do now, just out of camera, is I will go and do all of the other sweeps that are required for the windowsills. It's going to be exactly the same motion as we've done for the bottom window. And I'm also going to go and copy these windows across to the entire facade. And I'll provide a file with all of that done. So you can just go to the next lesson and open up that begin lesson if you want to see all of that complete. So just to recap, what we've done in this one is we've gone and created the windows, and I've showed you the different ways that you can either create two-dimensional splines and sweep them to create the window frames, or create polys, planes, subdivide them, and using the insert tool you can go and create your window widths in that way, then using the shell command and also detaching the glass from your window frames. So all of that is quite a good workflow if you have these type of multifaceted windows to do. Great, so that is it, and the next one you will see most of this being copied and replaced, so we're going to jump a little bit in time and then get onto some of the finishing details before we move on to our next facade.